Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you, talking obviously about heat stress management in the workplace, and of course kind of narrowing down and talking about a new OSHA standard, right? As if we don't have enough of them in place, but a new OSHA standard that's going to deal with the heat stress management in the workplace. And what does that look like in the whole process, right? It's still in the making, still in the works, right? The last part of what I have anyway is that open it up to like the small businesses from August to December. Basically an open comment period to businesses just to say, hey, how is this going to affect you once it goes into place? And again, probably more like this. What's the cost going to be, right? Because they don't want to put people or companies out of business. So how do you make that happen? What's the best and most effective way to do it? And so there's been a lot of input to it. This whole process has been going on since 2021. So as you can imagine, the standard just doesn't automatically just get dropped down on companies. It goes through the entire process, comment periods, that type of thing. So again, just talking about the heat stress management in the workplace. There's some videos I'll be just moving on from, just because for the time's sake, this presentation can take more than an hour. So I want to try and at least narrow it down, so get hopefully some good information, everybody in the room. What can you use probably as companies, protecting your workers? If you have something in place, obviously just to build upon that, that's going to be, your best alternative, keeping workers safe. So again, just our learning objectives. And just talking about fatalities, typically about 40 in a year from 2011 to 2021 that are related to heat stress management. And one that just happened here in the last month or so in Texas, right? So the southern states that get the constant heat in the workplace and protecting workers that way. So again, as you can imagine, 80% of those are going to be in the outside environment, 20% obviously in the inside as well too. But look at the second one, 50 to 70% of those fatalities are occurring in the first few days of working in warm or hot environments. Our bodies need time to adjust, don't they? Going from the cold to the heat, even from the heat to the cold, right? Everything seems that much colder when we come out of, 60 to 70 degree days. And this winter, like it is, it's like we've got going, we're like in one season we're going from fall to winter, and then from winter into spring. It's just been crazy temperature variety as well too. So again, what's occupational heat stress? Because that's typically what you hear. So metabolic heat, right? Our body's internal workings, and the fact that we create heat inside, whether we're working, just standing still, whatever it might be. Your environmental factors, so add that in. So your heat, what is the humidity outside, those type of things. Your clothing and your PPE. Again, all those just obviously increasing heat storage within the body. So how do you mitigate, how do you take care of that? And that's, again, basically what OSHA is trying to address through the new standard that is going to be coming out as well. So again, those type of things that we know that we got to protect not just ourselves, but the people around us when we talk about heat stress management. So again, the heat obviously makes it harder to think because our body's doing other things, trying to keep ourselves cool, right? So it's taking all that energy, putting it into the activities that our body needs to keep it cool. And where does that blood flow not go to? Typically, as much to the brain. So when we think, right, it's like, geez, I don't want to make that decision today. It's too damn hot out here. And that's what ends up happening. So difficult to concentrate. And when you're talking about any complex problems in the work environment, again, you can see just the possibility of error being made, and then of course could be, injury or God forbid fatality to somebody else. If people are taking medications, so you got to talk about those pre-existing health conditions where medication becomes a part of it. So again, your high blood pressure, mood, anxiety disorder, substance abuse, all those drugs have a tendency, like I said, to again disrupt our body heat, even the fluids that we have in our body as well too, and what we urinate out. Some of those drugs will do that. So again, our body just works that much harder to maintain a normal temperature, heat range, and to keep cool as well. Heat stress plus poor sleep equals accidents, right? If you come to work half awake, half asleep in the morning because you didn't get rest the night before, it was just too hot, you didn't have air conditioning, that's going to be an issue. So again, just deep sleep to recuperate. Anybody get irritable when it's hot out? Yeah, I think so, right? because it's like our bodies are just all over the place. We're trying to adjust, and because of that, it's just like, don't nobody talk to me today, right? Because I'm going to have that short temper. Easy to become frustrated. And of course, increases accidents and injuries as well too. There's the last one, just causes higher absenteeism, right? You see the picture of the guy showing up at his worker's door. You know, he calls in for a day off. Obviously, now he's got his fishing gear on because that's what he's going to go do. Kind of the same thing, right? Get out of the heat for the day. You know, some people look at the temperature coming up and they just want the day off because it's just too dang hot to be out there to keep themselves cool. So again, there's what OSHA is talking about, or what they started the whole process with in October 2021. So the advance notice of proposed rulemaking on heat injury and illness prevention in indoor and outdoor work settings. And of course, you can see just kind of how that process works. They throw out questions to obviously companies. Maybe some of your companies have responded to that during that time period, public input as well. And then again, they shut that public comment period down at the end of December of 2021. So what they're looking for is, first of all, what's the best way or the best metric to define and assess heat standards? So again, you could look at your ambient temperature. So again, air temperature of any object or environment. A second way of doing it is, how about your air temperature and your humidity combined? And if you look at that National Weather Service humidity heat index, that's what it combines. Combines your heat and your humidity, and being able to protect your workers obviously in that environment. Lastly, more of a complicated obviously way of doing it, but the wet bulb globe temperature as well. So again, looking at heat stress in the direct sunlight, and of course talking about temperature, humidity, wind speed, sun angle, cloud cover. So again, more defined way of talking about, you know, taking care of your heat stress, or at least determining where that might be at for the workplace. So there's that National Weather Service heat index that I was talking about, and you can see just on the left-hand side. And I'm going to share just an OSHA app along with NIOSH, which is the National Institute of Safety and Health. They combined to put together that app that looks at the temperature and the humidity in whatever city you're looking at for that specific point in time. And then, of course, talking about the caution, the danger warning, obviously, and of course, extreme danger as well. They also talked about what does employers need to do to, again, provide heat stress relief for their workers. So engineering and administrative controls. Well, engineering would be obviously like, you know, taking fans, right, to cool people off. Maybe it's air conditioning. Maybe it's shade, right? Covering, obviously, so people can get out of the environment. Administrative would be like, okay, now we're going to try and start our workday earlier. So instead of 8 in the morning, maybe, now we're going to start it at 5 in the morning, right? When the sun comes up, just to try and get away from that extreme heat maybe in the middle of the day. Could be just working, you know, putting workers in an environment in and out for an hour at a time. So those type of things. What's called acclimatization, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But when workers go from like the winter into the spring, into the summer, our bodies have to adjust to that, right? It's going to be a cold environment that we're coming from. Now we have to get used to the heat. So again, you work a certain parts of the day for basically a whole week if you're a new worker, or if you're somebody that has been exposed to that type of environment in the past. So again, it's just certain percentages to get up to 100% on day 4 or day 5. Monitoring methods could be a buddy system, could be, you know, the responsible person or the competent person to talk about that, as well to the company at points basically to watch after employees, make sure that they're, you know, keeping hydrated. And then of course, just what are the written policies and procedures that each company has to address those heat stress illnesses. And then of course, asking questions about worker training and engagement, benefit cost, economic impacts, right? So government, I guess there's going to be an economic impact when you put a new standard like that into place. But again, what does that look like? And by doing that, are we going to put companies out of business? And then of course, just the potential impacts on small entities. I was talking about the small business being able to obviously put their input in from August to December of last year. So they're taking obviously all of that information, assembling it, and seeing what's going to be the best way to go with this. And of course, right now, here's what OSHA's current initiative is, and that's a safety message. You've probably seen that they put out water, rest, shade. That's the big thing. And OSHA talks about, with the new standard, when you get to that 80-degree mark, right, where now you're at the caution for workers working in that environment, how long of a time period do you need to give for breaks? If it's, and right now what I'm understanding is if it's under 80 degrees, you're talking 10-minute breaks every hour. If it's over 80 degrees, now it's 15-minute breaks every hour. And staying hydrated and being hydrated. Basically 2 16-ounce bottles of water that employees need to drink at their breaks every hour. That's a lot of water. But again, how much are we, perspirating, right? How much is getting evaporated off our body that we need to replenish? April 8th of about 2 years ago, they put a national emphasis program in, or OSHA did, as far as just strict enforcement, or at least coming out to sites when it gets pretty much over 80 degrees. They call that a heat priority day. So again, they're going to increase their enforcement efforts, proactive outreach, and technical assistance. And when we talk about we talk about the enforcement efforts, what are they basing it on? Right? Because when you throw a standard out there, that's what you're basing the enforcement on. What they're doing right now is they're enforcing it under what's called the General Duty Clause, or Section 5 of the OSHA Act. And basically all that says, in short, is employers, you have a duty and an obligation to keep your workers safe, to prevent those type of hazards so your workers don't get injured or, God forbid, worse. That's it. So where did they take their enforcement efforts from with that? Well, they base it on other entities such as like NIOSH, CDC, again, because they have actual probably heat standards or heat-related information in place that OSHA can go back to and look at and base their citations on as well too. Doing program pre-planned inspections again in those high-risk industries. Basically anybody working outside, right? So if you're, traffic, obviously you're working on the roads, obviously in the sun most of the day, if not all the day. And again, like I said, making sure obviously, and when OSHA shows up, making sure that you have protocols, or what do you have in place basically, or what's your company policy when it comes to protecting your employees from the heat. So again, just more information. They talk about obviously drinking cool water, rest breaks, dress for the heat, those type of things. Talking about first aid for heat illness, right? Your big thing, and you can see just in that picture on the bottom, if you have somebody that's too hot, they're overheating. So we're talking about heat exhaustion or heat stroke. Got to get them in water. Got to cool them off as quick as possible. I get it. You don't have those type of, tubs or that type of thing. A lot of water, maybe a lot of ice that you can cool people down. But the big thing is getting that core body temperature down as quick as possible. And again, that's that heat phone app that I was talking about earlier, downloadable that you can put onto your phone. Obviously it takes, again, that humidity and what's the actual heat in the environment, and are you looking at caution, warning, or danger, much like you saw in that National Weather Service information from earlier. And then of course on the bottom, just it talks about the first aid as well that you can provide for people, the signs and symptoms of heat stress. I'll talk a little bit about that if I have time. I'll go over here. And then again, just right now there are 29 state OSHA plans. So basically what happens is the states basically tell OSHA we want to control our own OSHA system within the state. And by doing that, now it's the state, the county, and the local governments they have authority over, whereas like in North Dakota, the OSHA is a federal OSHA state, so they don't have control over state government and local and county governments. But again, OSHA's looking in this whole setup to what are other states doing under the state plans. So again, California, Oregon, Washington, OSHA. Those state plans obviously talk about training, which if you know any of this OSHA standards, a lot of training, right? How to protect your workers, how can they see the hazards and prevent those hazards for themselves. Water hydration, breaks obviously, shade requirement, that acclimatization plan again, working people certain times or just a certain amount of the day when you go from a cold to a hot or hot to a cold environment. And then of course at the last day they're working 100%. So it's really a short time period. It's not like 2-3 weeks, it's a 1 week time period. Heat illness prevention plan, emergency response plan, what our company's emergency medical response plan, and then of course, obviously with OSHA, it's record keeping requirements in case there is injuries or God forbid worse. OSHA is also going back and looking at, hey, what does NIOSH say about, heat stress and how do you protect workers? And from my understanding, OSHA is kind of leaning towards maybe some of what NIOSH, that National Institute of Safety and Health, again, that's a part of the CDC, what are they recommending to keep workers safe? So a medical monitoring program, if they're exposed to heat stress above their recommended alert limits, and of course, again, just providing information to the healthcare provider about what type of work is being done in that environment. So again, just the standard that employers would share with their medical doctor for the company if you have one that's assigned. So again, what's the employee's duties, their potential exposure to heat, protective equipment they may need to wear, and of course just any other relevant information from medical evaluations of that specific worker. They also talk about pre-placement medical evaluation. So essentially it would be like a yearly physical that they'd be looking at. Now that's going to be probably an expensive side of things for companies to do that for each individual worker, but that's what NIOSH recommends. And they talk about comprehensive work medical history, of course, medical exam, what kind of drugs are you on, right? That those pre-existing health conditions where you're on any kind of medications, obesity, again, wearing PPE and other equipment that might affect how hot, obviously, that person's body heat becomes. And then, of course, if there is any change in health status or if there's an increase in job-related heat stress, now we're talking probably more than annually as far as those medical evaluations by a doctor. Posting of signs, right? Being able to tell people dangerous heat stress area. Talking about that, at least NIOSH is anyway. Protective clothing required. Illnesses that may occur. I'm going to keep going here. So again, just how does our body stay cool? Again, radiation, convection, evaporation. So sunny days can feel hotter, obviously. Just, again, that engineering control, trying to get people cool, that fan, air conditioning, and of course, just evaporation or sweat. NIOSH talks about, again, 98.6 degrees as our normal body temperature. In order to stay within just a normal range so we don't experience that heat stress, you basically can go 1.8 degrees above and below that level of temperature. So again, you can imagine our bodies get, 101, 102 degrees maybe in the heat. Again, that would be outside of the realm of, again, normal body functioning when it comes to NIOSH's description. Our body stays cool, hypothalamus, again, thermal regulation. Again, it just affects, obviously, receptors in our skin. It gets our blood vessels closer to the skin so we can shed that heat, right? So again, the blood flow goes through, that heat's going away. And of course, talking about sweat evaporation as well. If heat entering your body obviously is more than the rate of heat leaving your body, that's when you're talking about that core temperature, body rising, and the heat illnesses that are going to come as a result of that. So again, could be syncope, could be heat exhaustion, could be heat stroke. So various ones that you're looking at. Heat injury, heat illness, again, the injury obviously just direct or indirect injury because of the employee's exposure to heat. And of course, just the illness, the different types of medical conditions that you would see as well. The other ways, again, just talking about ways heat can cause injuries. you know, your palms get sweaty, right? You sweat a lot. And of course, you grab anything, and of course, it could, you know, you don't get a good grip on equipment that you're using, or could be slips, trips, and falls. Fogged up safety glasses, hot equipment is the other problem. And of course, just dizziness, right? People forget, they neglect safety protocols. It's too hot again to make those complex decisions, and those type of things happen when they can't keep their body cool. So again, heat rash, you know, being probably the first one. Heat cramps, obviously, just not getting enough water in that environment. And of course, talking about staying away from, you know, I see a lot of younger people, you know, the Red Bull, coffee, right? The caffeines that are going to make you urinate more. And you want to keep water in your body as opposed to, you know, passing it out of your body. So water, again, Powerade, Gatorade. So again, just keeping liquids, obviously, and making those available to people. Heat exhaustion, again, now you're talking about, you know, the top levels of, you know, the heat issues that could come, caused by too few fluids. Again, heavy sweating. You're losing a lot of water and salt, so again, replenishing that. People even talk about like pickle juice, right? I mean, those type of things, just replenish those electrolytes, those salts that you need back in your body. Finally, heat stroke. Now you're talking about, like I said, extreme, get the person to the emergency room as quick as possible, cooling them down as quick as possible. If you can, you know, like I said, the barrel of cool water, ice, putting them directly in it. It's going to be a shock to their system, but it will cool their core body temperature as quick as possible. Heat syncope, dizziness, rhabdomyolysis, muscle breakdown. Again, other types of heat injuries that you could see, or heat illnesses that you could see. Kind of moving forward a little bit here because I won't have a lot of time. But again, just talking about those risk factors. And again, employers, training employees, and I get it, there's HIPAA out there, right? So again, how much information can you get from your employees so that they can allow you to help them? Because that's what you're looking at. So again, if they're not accustomed to the heat, prior history of heat-related illnesses, I've had heat stroke before, 100-degree day, cutting hay, no cap on, very little fluids. I get to the end of the day, and all of a sudden, I am burning up. I'm shivering on the inside. I'm burning up on the outside, about 105-degree temperature, and now I can't do very well in the heat because of that. Because now your body it breaks your body down at that point. Could be not drinking enough water. Can harden yourself without fluids, right? Sunburn. People that are older, 65 years in age and older. And of course, genders. Males more likely to get heat illness than females. Overweight, poor circulation, and now you get to your prescription drug use, and you can see obviously all the different types of, you know, drugs that people will use for their medical conditions and how that affects them. Typically affecting the fluid balance of the body, because a lot of those are making you urinate more, so you're losing obviously more water in that as well. Those type of health issues you can see obviously. Again, the medications that come with that. The other risk factors, sometimes it's just how much of that heat does the worker, are they able to tolerate, right? And, you know, trying to give fluids to people every hour, you know, give them breaks, whether it's above or below 80 degrees. Let's see, I'm going to just keep going just a little bit here. So how can you protect yourself? Got to think about yourself first, but again, the companies, this is probably what needs to be put into place for good effective heat prevention, heat illness, injury prevention program. So drinking water every 15 minutes, even if a person's not thirsty, right? Got to keep hydrated the whole time. And about 2 16-ounce bottles of water every hour. It's a lot of water, but again, how much are we perspirating just because of the work that we're in? Electrolyte, obviously replacing beverages. And of course, I talked about avoiding caffeine. It's a diuretic. It's just going to make you urinate more. Taking periodic breaks. Again, just the engineering controls, shaded, cooled air conditioning. You know, you see trailers obviously being pulled that are air conditioned for employees to give them those 10 or 15-minute breaks. Avoid eating a hot, heavy meal, right? And you're probably not going to want to do that in the heat anyway, but your body has to work that much harder to digest that big meal. So again, more heat being produced by your body that your body has to try and get rid of. And in a hot environment, a little bit difficult. Pace yourself, monitor your urine output. Of course, ask the question, is there a better, safer way to accomplish my job or task? Technology is a big thing, right? You can monitor your heart rate, your pulse, your skin temperature. So again, that's a good way. Smart hard hat helmets as well. Just temperature sensor, heart rate monitor. That's going to provide information to somebody's cell phone or to their iPad, their laptop, so they can monitor you that way. Because if it's a big work environment, maybe you've got one person responsible, you know, for 10, 15, 20 or more people on that job site. Sunscreen, big part of it, right? Trying to keep, again, those UVA rays and UVB rays, ultraviolet rays off of your skin. Again, mostly when you talk about those type of rays, it's most intense between 10 and 4, 10 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. And the recommended type of sunscreen is what's called an SPF 30, so sun protective factor of 30. And then you're looking at something that says broad spectrum. Why broad spectrum? Because it takes care of both that UVA rays, which is from the sun, obviously, you know, the spots you get in your skin, the wrinkles, and then the UVB rays, which is going to be your sunburn. So it takes care of both of those, so the broad spectrum. Vitamin D, right? People say, well, I get my vitamin D from the sun. Well, maybe that's not the best way to look at it, right? There's supplements for that. You don't want to let the sun beat you down and then get the increased risk of skin cancer possibly along the way. Get plenty of sleep, obviously, and then self-monitor. Nobody knows your body like you do, but how about just the color of your urine? What is, and truly, and when you look at it, that's probably the best way to tell if you're drinking enough fluids and how is that impacting, you know, your body. So there's the chart right there. And some companies put this up on the back of a porta potty door, you know, maybe the restrooms at their business, because that's probably the best way to know where you're at as far as your water consumption. And are you getting enough? Or should you be getting more? Or again, if you're in that amber, orange, or brown range, now you could be in real trouble, right? You just don't have enough fluids in your body. You know, you could go into, obviously, you know, you could probably, you know, your body obviously is in stress at that point in time, and a lot of bad things can happen beyond that. Protecting yourself from the sun, dressing for hot conditions, right? All sorts of, you know, just, you know, equipment or PPE that people can use to keep themselves cool. Again, a lot of it is just put water in it, wring it out. It's going to be cool for a couple hours. Again, just keeps that core body temperature down. And of course, about the cost of this is probably, I don't know, anywhere from the $20 to the $50, $60 range. For that vest is probably the most expensive. And you're thinking, well, that thing's going to keep heat in. It's not going to let it get out. But again, it's just got the material inside of it that if you wet it down, it's kind of like putting on a cool bath or a cool towel. And again, keeps you cool for a couple hours. So again, that's probably going to be an important part of, you know, just worker protection or your company's protection for the employees. Cooling towels, wristbands, you know, your bandanas, your hoodies, obviously you can see, and some people I'm sure that do wear those type of things already, because it does keep them cool, keeps that core body temperature down. Again, for companies, just that heat illness prevention plan. If there's not one in place, that's probably something that OSHA will require, I would imagine, once that heat standard does come into play. So again, obviously the employer's got to be responsible to mitigate the heat. And of course, how do they mitigate those hazards? And day-to-day supervision might be part of it. Again, that responsible person, that competent person that might need to, you know, be the bearer of getting water to people, making sure they take breaks. That's one more person probably out of the work environment, right? Unless you add those type of responsibilities to who you've got basically in place at the current time. Just to make sure those type of things are being met along the way, that people are staying cool, staying hydrated, throughout the workday. Assess the heat hazards and risk. So again, talking about that wet bulb globe method, the ambient temperature, just the heat and the humidity. Again, who monitors that, right? Who's going to take care of those type of things? Make sure acclimatization is taken care of, and then physical activity as well. Again, who, what, where, when, and how. What's the plan going to look like, and who's responsible for it, and what's going to be included in that whole plan. There's your engineering, obviously. You know, some companies have trailers. You know, you see the big fan at the front with seats, keeping people cool, tents, just shade. Technology. Companies coming out obviously every day with new technology and what you can do. And this one actually just monitors your hydration status. So again, it takes the saliva or sweat sample from that person, records the hydration level, and they just keep monitoring people that way, making sure that you are hydrated well enough in that work environment as you're going throughout the day. Again, just providing breaks or increased break times. I talked about that 80-degree threshold as far as OSHA. I think that's probably something you're going to see. 15-minute breaks, no longer 10 when you get above 80 degrees. There's that acclimatization I was talking about. So two different areas. New workers, again, when you're going from the cold to the heat, your body's got to adjust to it. So again, you basically work 20% the first day, 40% on day two. New workers, New workers are going to be 20% first day, 40 the next day, all the way up to the fifth day when they finally can now work 100% or all day basically in the heat environment. That's probably going to be a very real thing. Workers with previous experience, you can see the difference if they've had that kind of exposure to their body before, what day 1 to day 4 looks like as far as percentage of exposure. Let's see here once. Buddy system can be another way, just administrative ways to take care of workers. So again, looking after each other, monitoring each other. Again, monitoring the weather. Talked about scheduling the most strenuous work to cooler times of the day. And again, do you work employees in and out of a hot environment, maybe for 1 or 2 hours at a time, put the next employee in at that environment? Probably not going to happen in where you folks are at with your businesses, but again, that is another way of taking care of that heat environment. Again, is there any easier way of doing it? So again, more people doing the same job to help, or anything, you know, mechanization, you know, equipment-wise that might help. Just your toolbox training talks. You know, could be, you know, once a day in the morning, could be once every week. But again, just sharing information about what the weather is going to look like that day, getting people prepared for when they, you know, approach the workday. How do they do it? You know, reminding about water breaks, those type of things. Just education up front, just to keep on the forefront of people's minds. And then there's the training part of it, right? What can be done to protect you? Hydration, obviously, first aid treatments, short and long-term effects of heat illness. Heat stroke can permanently damage organs, other parts of your body as well too. What are the types of heat stress hazards? If you do have any kind of pre-existing health conditions, how is that going to affect you? And again, just trying to provide that information, as much information to the employee as possible on protection. Signs and symptoms of heat injury and illness, proper precautions, and then of course worker responsibilities for following proper work practices. Again, if there's something in place the company has, that employees know what that is, and they can obviously abide by it and work with their coworkers to make sure that happens as well. Effects of therapeutic drugs or any kind of drugs obviously on your system when you're talking about working in the heat. Protective clothing. Cultural attitude, right? Can't harden yourself against requirement for fluids. That's absolutely a myth. Your body needs water, you sweat it out, you urinate it out, and you need to replenish, and at greater rates, obviously, when you're talking about the heat. And then, of course, just location of written training materials. Checklists are helpful to companies just to make sure, obviously, you know, the boxes are being checked, so we're doing this, this, and this, and that probably aligns with the company policies and procedures as far as how you keep your workers safe. So water, shade, And then emergencies, right? Got to talk about that. What happens if this person goes down? OSHA standard, and from a letter of interpretation back in actually 2007, they basically said, hey, listen, companies, you need to have your people trained in first aid and CPR, because if you can't get emergency services like the ambulance or the fire department to your location within 4 minutes, boy, 4 minutes, right? That's talking traffic in town, even through Bismarck, Mandan, Fargo, Grand Forks. If you can't do that, then your workers have to be trained in CPR and first aid. And why the 4 minutes? Because if somebody all of a sudden goes unconscious, their heart stops beating. Now you can give them high effective CPR. Get that blood pumping to the brain. Get the oxygen to the brain, right? That's why they set that 4 minute time level, you know, as far as getting emergency services to your location. Worker training, heat awareness. Who's your knowledgeable person, right? Or your competent person, your responsible person. Who's going to put that plan into place on the work site? You got to have, you know, 1, 2, 3 responsible people to do that. And then, of course, just reminders. Drinking water, right? Take rest, obviously. Monitor one another, so that buddy system. Finally, I'll just finish up with first aid for heat illness. And again, why putting people, obviously, in that tub of water with ice, trying to get their core body temperature down. If you've got ice available, notice where those ice packs are at on that person in the picture. Right on your main artery. So again, your femoral artery inside of your legs, your brachial artery right here, and of course your carotid right here. Trying to cool that blood down as quick as possible. So again, it doesn't get too high, doesn't cause that heat stroke as well. Time's of the essence, obviously, to get them help, emergency medical help. But the cooling part, air conditioning, the fan, you know, if they're conscious and they can swallow, can you get water or whatever, you know, beverage you've got, Powerade, Gatorade, into their system to help cool their body down? And then, of course, getting them to the hospital as quick as possible. But the cooling effects, obviously, of that, but especially the ice bags, and where you see them placed at in light if you don't have, like I said, just that ice bath that you could probably put them in. And what I was talking about right there, removing outer layers of clothing, using fans, obviously, anything that's going to help keep that person cool, but obviously getting them out of the heat environment initially. Never leave a worker with heat-related illness alone. Again, that's what you're going to see as far as signs of heat stroke. There's confusion, there's slurred speech, unconsciousness, or they could just be terribly lethargic. It looks like they're going to go down on you. So again, getting them in that cool environment, trying to get their body temperature down. And then just follow-up information, like I said, just talking about, you know, how it can stress the heart. So a lot of good information out there that is going to be helpful to workers. Can be posters, signs, right, that you put up to help people, remind people of that. But really the training aspect is a big part of it. Just make sure people are aware of what they need to do to keep their body temperature down. And that is it, actually. Do you have any questions at all? Yes, sir.
Okay, so how are you going to accommodate the mental ramifications of those of us who have built grit through years of service in all weather systems and now have to watch others come into the system and are getting breaks every hour for 80-degree days?
It's a good question. And I don't even have a good answer for you. But you're absolutely right, though, too, because there's people been involved in the industry for a lot of years, and all of a sudden we're going to put the brakes to it and say, whether you've been there for a lot of years or whether you're the newer crowd coming into that business, you know, this is what you got to follow. And I don't have a good answer for you on that. I really don't. It's a very good question.
Speaking from experience, I guess I've been in the 17 years. It's kind of a dying industry. You're kind of getting a lot of the younger people aren't joining the industry. They kind of want to they don't want to work as much during the summer months, especially up here in this area. So it's kind of like a sprint, go, 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 right? Well, if we don't bring in the younger generation, bring in the younger people, and kind of cater to them how we can best fit to bring them in. You're going to be that guy you're going to have to do the low level and the high level scope of work. You got to have people, you got to have fresh blood coming in. You got to treat them. You got to treat them equal, not necessarily equal, but like I said, you do have to cater to some of that. I've witnessed that in my work life and in my past military life as well. So you're always going to have those new people coming in, and it's going to be how you train them and how you treat them, whether or not they're going to stick around. If you want them to stick around and take some more of the medial tasks away, so you could focus on some of the harder and more talented areas, I guess, then that's kind of what you're going to have to do.
It's a tough one to say that, but generational wise, you're right. Everyone's got different needs, right? And it seems like, I don't know what generation we're at right now, Z or X, or I don't know, I have no idea. But again, I was kind of in the, I don't know, the baby boomer crowd, I guess, as far as my age. And it's a different environment of just how to look at the work environment nowadays and what's required to keep people employed so they're interested in continuing.
I agree with all that for myself.
Yep.
I also look out there to see it myself.
It is frustrating. It does get
Very,
frustrating.
very frustrating.
You bet.
Especially when it's a position with somebody that I can't see the position, and now you're telling me that this individual gets 20-minute breaks longer than me. I'm out there for work.
Well, I don't think there's going to be a difference that way. It's got to be if I'm kind of hearing you right, it's got to be the same across the board. But you're right, the new worker type thing, acclimated type, but the breaks have to be the same across the board. You can't, discriminate that way, I guess. Hey, this is a whole new world, right? Before we ourselves know, you got to drink a lot of water, get some rest, get some shade type of thing. Now it's going to say, OSHA's saying this is what you have to do. Not that we know what to do. Now you got to do this. And that's the hard part, right? Yes, sir. Right. And you know what? It's not. I mean, being a federal state, OSHA does not. I mean,
I know we're not, we don't
Right.
have the same
Right.
standards applied to us,
right.
but I mean, is there gonna be a requirement on us as field inspectors and whatnot to help with any of this? Or is
Not.
it just gonna,
It's company specific. It's not exactly like the engineer who's with the project on a daily basis. Now, here's the other thing though too. You employ companies that are under OSHA, under the OSHA umbrella, so to speak. It's kind of like help them almost, right? Put in that, especially if you see somebody that looks like they're kind of in a tough shape, say something, just because you educate your people obviously as well too on, hazards, and this being one of them obviously. So just being that extra set of eyes sometimes just to say something. But as far as direct responsibility, not so much. 1 minute. Anybody else? Like 1 minute left. Hey everyone, I appreciate your time. I know it's a lot of information, but when it comes, and I don't know if it's going to come this year, it will at some point in time, that, just a little information up front that's going to be helpful. So have a great day, everyone.